Well, hello, and welcome to Mom with a Microphone. We're so glad you're here to join us today. Today, we have a very interesting topic that I think a lot of people can relate to, and I don't know, we'll just kind of see how it goes. But I have a very special friend here. Her name is Bree, and I'm going to give her a chance to introduce yourself. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. This is my first podcast appearance, and I don't know how it's going to go.
It's going to just go. We're just talking.
Yeah. I can talk and you can talk.
Oh, obviously.
And we have good conversations.
We do.
So
We have great conversations.
I'm not worried about it. I'm just like, am I going to be weird? Will people think I'm mean?
Mean? Did you say mean?
Sometimes. I mean, people really, in the past, I haven't really met a lot of new people now. And maybe it's different because they'll actually get to hear me out. But people used to say, I really thought you were stuck up, or I really thought you were mean or whatever. And then I know I'm going to say something that's going to come off the wrong way. So give me grace. You know me, but like, I don't want them to turn off for me. So,
okay. So perfect segue. So today we're going to be talking about, again, something that I think everyone can relate to. And that is like the pressures of perfectionism, and really just the overall feeling that you have to have it all together, trying to people please, and then how to like juggle that and balance that with like self-care and boundaries, because that's something that no one ever really wants to talk about. We expect other people to know our boundaries, but we have a really hard time communicating them sometimes. And maybe we get pushed to the limit and then we just pop off and it's like, oh, maybe I should have told you before you crossed my boundary.
Do you feel like you have good boundaries?
I think it depends on what we're talking about. I think there are areas of my life where I for sure have some like strong boundaries. And then I have others where it's like I struggle to say no, or, you know, it might be something that I want to do. So I will like push that boundary. You know what I mean?
Like overextending or stretching yourself.
Yeah.
What does it feel like when you struggle to say no?
Ooh, I think it depends again on what it is. So there are times and like situations or things I'm involved in where a lot of times I want to say no, and then I just feel like there's an obligation. Like when you're committed, it's not always about what you want, and it's not always about wanting to say no and going with that feeling. It's like sometimes like let your yes be yes, let your no be no, and I struggle with that. So it kind of just depends on what it is. You know what I mean?
So like, it sounds like you're sort of talking about in a professional capacity or even a formal capacity, like maybe you are on a committee of some sort of church or something.
Right.
So you feel obligated to say yes for those reasons. But if it's personal, do you have trouble saying no? Like, let's say I wanted you to come to my house at 5 a.m. and move me tomorrow. Would that be hard for you to say no to?
No. I think it depends on who you are. You know what I mean? Like, there are people who I'd be like, oh yeah, for sure. Like, you got my back, I got yours, no big deal. And I want to have that willingness to do that for anyone, but I don't. Like, if we're being realistic, like I don't. So, you know, it depends on who you are. Sometimes I'd be like, no, bro, I'll come at 7. Or, you know, something like that. But I think it kind of just depends.
So it's been hard for me it would be hard for me to say no. Now I'm recovering now from codependency, because that's what it is. But it has been like, even if I didn't really know you, it would still be hard for me not to feel bad about saying no. Even if I did manage to, I would feel like I wanted to try to meet your expectation and to try to like do something special for you.
Which feeds into the people pleasing.
Yeah, so definitely.
Let's talk a little bit about you. Like, who are you? Tell us who you are.
Sure.
About yourself.
I'm Brianna Weldon. I am a mom of 2 boys that are adorable, and they look like each other.
Cute, man.
And I have a husband who is a man. And I'm 35. I turned 35 in October, and it was like my brain chemistry changed overnight. I don't know if I shared that with you at all, but it was like I just began to take myself seriously that day. So
I'm not laughing at you. It's just the way you said it. Okay.
I mean, it's, you know, it's goofy, but that day was really like, I just started to see myself differently. I was a bit anxious about the sense of like being, I don't want to say old, but
You're closer to 40 than 20. And
yeah, I always have this sort of dread about the future. It's not like I don't feel sad that I'm not going to be fresh anymore, but I don't know. I just feel like I'm closer to being 70 and all my friends dying all the time.
Oh, no.
I've worked on that. But anyway, so that day, instead of feeling badly about aging, I felt like it made me feel legitimate. Like it gave me, it was like, okay, you've put in the years at this point, so you can take yourself seriously. But anyway, one thing I haven't told you is maybe by the time this comes out, I will be working as a life coach.
Awesome. I could so see that, man. Wow.
It's not really a stretch, but as I finally have started a training so that I can formalize my skills, I've realized how much sort of what we're going to talk about is what held me back, just this expectation to be perfect and thinking that I wasn't ready because I just felt like I always had to be perfect at things. But that's definitely not the case. I mean, there are people in my cohort that are like, they don't even want to talk in public. And I'm a pretty good public speaker. I have a YouTube channel, Brianna Entrepreneur, which I've started posting again as I'm back on this journey. So I have a lot of these skills. I have a lot of people skills. And these are people who don't even really feel confident speaking. And I was thinking, wow, I really overthought this. Like I could have been doing this.
Right.
I mean, I'm still going to get something from the course, but I definitely have been held back. And that's why I want to talk about people pleasing. Because I'm like in my healing era, my healing from codependency era, which has been a couple years of just this never ending realization that I'm codependent. And almost no amount of healing seems to get me out of the hole. So it's a pretty deep hole. Are you familiar with codependency?
Yeah, but I was going to just say, like, for listeners, do you want to give an explanation for maybe those who don't know or understand?
Yes, there are so many definitions, and the term
types.
really it originated within the substance abuse community to speak to sort of the fact that the loved ones of the person who is addicted have their own addiction in a sense, or like they become disordered as well because they're working hard to accommodate the addiction. So it's like addiction by proxy. But in the broader sense, codependency, the way I define it, and the way I see it in myself, it's having one's well-being be contingent on another person's well-being. So if you said, we got to do this podcast at 1 a.m. and I'm like, well, my kid has not slept all week because I do have a 14-month-old and he's not sleeping consistently. I'm tired. I have to get up early in the morning. But I would have, this is not current me, but the codependent me would have prioritized you being happy and getting what you needed over me getting what I needed. And even if I felt terrible tomorrow, I would still
just do it.
It would be like it was worth it to me. And it's also in a disproportionate focus on external validation, which took me so long to understand. Like, why is it bad to want to be proud of yourself? But the difference is, it's not exactly being proud of yourself as much as it is showing people that you're worthy when you already are worthy.
Yeah.
So that's codependency. And I take it, okay, so you mentioned it's contingent, or it's like conditional if you have a hard time saying no. So do you perceive yourself to be a people pleaser?
I don't think so.
Do you perceive yourself to be a perfectionist?
Yes.
So,
But it's not for other people, it's for me. You know what I mean? Like I want to maintain a standard of excellence. And maybe that does come back to people pleasing a little bit, because it's like, I want to be known as someone who does things well.
Yeah.
And does them well the first time. You know what I mean? Like, because that's what's important to me.
Excellence is important to me as well. I think I wanted to make a distinction between perfectionism, a trauma symptom, versus perfectionism as an extension of expertise. Because I don't think
that's
it's
big.
exactly bad to want your work to be good. Like, that's not categorically bad.
Right.
And also, I mean, I don't know what like Beyonce's childhood trauma is, but people always call her a perfectionist, and it pays off. Like, to
a degree.
And she's also so elite that perfection is attainable by her in a sense. Whereas me, a home baker, like, it's probably not reasonable for me to require being perfect at making cupcakes to take to a Labor Day pool party.
Right.
So that's the difference. Like, while I am very skilled and talented at baking, if I have to say so myself.
No lies.
I'm not an expert at it, but I push myself to try to get expert results, because, to be honest, I cannot handle being judged or criticized in that way. Like, if I feel like it's imperfect, I actually stopped baking once we moved back to St. Louis, because we used to live in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, when my husband was in the Army. So we moved back in 2019. I stopped baking because I couldn't handle the anxiety. Like, if I did one thing wrong, I wouldn't be able to sleep.
Really?
Yeah, and it became not worth it to me anymore. So I've started baking again, but it's definitely not what Beyonce's doing. Like, we're not on
Maybe
that
she
level.
bakes too. I don't know. So what do you think is the source or the reason for the perfectionism?
Perfectionism and people pleasing, I think, go hand in hand, and I wouldn't have connected them. But to be honest, at the root of it is shame. And at the root of the shame is the sense that you are not enough. And I think people talk about being enough or not enough a lot, but there's a lot of context missing, because, again, I'm 35. I didn't know I didn't love myself until I was 34. And so you can tell me that I'm enough, but if I don't have any sort of framework to know what that means, because I'm constantly rejecting myself, like, just telling me that doesn't do anything. So I needed to understand more about where that was coming from. And it's coming from I guess, to define not being enough. It's like, people are perfectionists because they feel like if they show up just as they are, they will not be accepted and it will not be enough. So I think that's one angle of it. I really need to like sniff. I don't want to. So it's going to be loud. I need to.
You're fine.
A little bit of mucus in there. So I think one aspect of it is you don't feel like if you show up as yourself, you will be accepted or embraced. Like, maybe you've experienced a lot of rejection or not being loved. And then the other element, from my perspective, is having this expectation to take on more, like to do more than you need to do. Like, not in a sense of you're more important than you actually are, but you have more responsibility than you actually do. So me coming here with 4 fingernails painted was like, 2 years ago, that just simply would not have happened.
Right.
2 years ago, if I broke a nail, because I wore acrylics all the time, if I broke a nail, like, I would not rest until that nail was fixed. And I'm delivered from that, fortunately. But I did have a thought on the way over here, like, they don't need your nails to be done. That's not a part of this. that's not going to have an impact on this. And as I was thinking about it through the week and sort of feeling some resistance and a bit of anxiety because I was out of ADHD medication all week. I tried to save my one pill for today, but my house was a wreck, so I had to take it yesterday so I could clean up. But so I had a little bit of anxiety, and I had to tell myself, like, you are not going on this podcast to change lives. You're just going to talk. Like, it's not your job to change lives. So people who are perfectionists sort of have this expectation that their work is more significant than it is, or they have more responsibility than they actually have. For me, I think that comes from being parentified as a kid, meaning like I acted in the parent role often, or my needs weren't always met as a child, given my mom's chronic health issues. So I am used to taking on a lot. And then I get in relationships and I think that I don't have to have needs. And yeah, I have to still do a lot and take on that role. And it just kind of like spiders out into everything else. So yeah, that's my perspective on perfectionism, which is not being enough just as you are. And I am enough with 4 nails painted.
Right.
Like I can still talk, I can still convey ideas. Not being enough, and then also thinking that you are more responsible for things than you actually are. So the people pleasing, I feel like, is the same because, and I really, really had to learn this, that it's like I should expect to have friendships that actually meet my needs. I truly didn't know that. I thought that all my needs were excessive. And so especially around when I got married, I was realizing I don't have emotional support because I've cultivated these relationships where that wasn't a part of it. They didn't have to provide emotional support for me. And so I've had to understand, like, this is normal. This is not special. It's not special to have a relationship that goes both ways. Like, it's okay to say, hey, I need to talk, and just talk to someone and not feel like it has to be equitable all the time or equal all the time. Because in a friendship, there will be times when I need to talk and times when you need to talk.
Right.
But yeah, so in the relationships with people pleasing, there's like this sense that your needs don't actually matter. You have more capacity. And it's just, I guess that's the best way to put it. It's like your needs don't matter. So when someone needs something from you, since they matter and you don't, you feel like you need to meet their need.
Right.
So yeah, that's perfectionism and people pleasing.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. When you see a people pleaser, because my perspective on it has changed, what do you think is going on with them?
That's a good question. I think typically my definition of a people pleaser would be someone who is very just concerned with how they appear to other people. So it's like, they'll do whatever it is that they're asked, or if someone's like, can you, drop everything and go do this for me? And maybe it's on the flip side of that, even where it's like, maybe they need to execute or give a presentation or something like that. And it's maybe something that they don't feel confident or comfortable in. And they'll go out of their way to learn all about that thing just so that they can come off as, I'm the expert or I'm the professional or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, they will go out of their way to make sure that they are not appearing as if they're lacking or less than. So again, it is like that, I guess that idea that they are lesser than, or that their needs maybe aren't as important, or that they aren't enough. Like, if they show up how they are, that they won't be enough. I've always felt like you are one of the few friends of mine who legitimately is like so in tune with how they feel and can communicate it. like the way that you're able to talk about how you feel and how you like reached that feeling and that decision and that process and what you learned. Like, I don't know probably anybody else who can do that, like truly do that. How do you do that? Like, what is?
Thanks for saying that.
I'm very serious. I'm so serious.
Well, one thing I've learned recently is this analysis is a coping mechanism. Over intellectualizing to deal with things when I feel like I have no power. So many situations I've analyzed to death and not done a single thing. Like if somebody disrespected me, I've looked at all the different ways, like how am I even in this? Why are we friends? How did I get here? Without even, but not actually, because I can do so much work to make it my problem and not their problem to avoid having to go to them. For instance, we had marriage counseling yesterday online, and I don't like when our marriage counselor laughs at me, but I'm afraid to say that to her. But I'm going to say it because I know that she'll be fine if I say that. But I was like sort of thinking through it, like, why does this bother me? Well, how am I feeling? And so I'm doing all that instead of just like saying, I don't appreciate being laughed
right.
at. Now, I think she does it because I'm getting intense and she's trying to like lighten the mood. But I'm intense. I don't want you laughing at me. And the work that I've been doing actually enabled me to have that thought. So it's encouraging to me when I get feedback that you see me as someone who's in touch and able to articulate because interestingly, like clinically, I've been told that I'm not attached to my emotions. I guess as my emotions are like in my head and not, but I don't like physically experience them. But I mean, that was the case in the past. I think that I'm a lot better at that. But yeah, overanalyzing is a way to deal with stuff without actually dealing with it. And I think it also is one of my gifts. So it just kind of is what it is. But I also think that people, I mean, everybody is not as concerned with their feelings, or they're not as perceptive. And apparently Libras like to see things from multiple perspectives. I saw this funny picture yesterday, and it was about Libras like wanting to see things from everywhere, and I'm a Libra, so maybe that's it. But
so I have a question. I know that people pleasing can show up in different ways. I know perfectionism can show up in different ways. So have you ever, because you're as a people pleaser, not anymore, but previously, someone who's really concerned with just how other people felt. So you're talking about your marriage counselor and how you don't want to tell her, don't laugh at me. Why? Why don't you want to tell her that?
Yeah, I can psychoanalyze myself here. It's because I feel like my feeling of discomfort with that is unnecessary, or it doesn't matter, and it's going to be a greater cost to her, or like make her feel uncomfortable or whatever, than it would be for me to just deal with it. And the fact that I have this conscious awareness, like even though, yeah, I still have the bad feeling, the fact that I'm aware of the fact that that feeling is not necessarily appropriate is still progress for me. So that's where I'm at. I'm still dealing with the impulses and the guilt and stuff, which we need to talk about guilt, but I'm aware that I don't need to stay there. And I wanted to comment on you talking about your perception of people pleasing and feeling like they need to be perfect or they want to look good. I think I also looked at people pleasers as people just wanting to be liked. But I guess what you said is, yes, they want to look good because their sense of self is completely outside of themselves. And I didn't realize that's what I do or did. So my big thing with my marriage has been, instead of actually taking care of myself, I put so much effort into doing things for my husband so that he could make me feel good instead of just making myself feel good. So that's one way my sense of self is outside of myself. Or even you see people who are achieving so much and it's like it never stops. Part of that's because that's the only way they feel value and worth is because of how other people react to it.
Yeah.
They don't have it internally. So, I mean, I definitely have grown in that myself, but I know that is what motivated me. And it's funny to think about that and think about, like, you know, I've been in pretty good shape most of my adult life. I have not recovered from this last baby, but
well, welcome to the club then.
I know it's sad. That's what happens to wives. I used to think that mothers just let themselves go, but it's not
not about letting yourself go usually.
It's that you only have so much capacity, and children just make it more complicated.
Well, and they change your body and your hormones and everything else. So the things that worked don't always work. And yeah, we can talk about that's a whole separate episode.
Well, that's kind of, I wanted to touch on that too, but let me finish this thought. So I come to terms with, so I did a lot of this healing while I was pregnant and then postpartum. And then to come to terms with the fact that a lot of what drove me to be in such good shape was the external validation. It was the praise, the adoration, the can I get your number in the gym even though I'm married? Like that really motivated me. And now I don't have that. And that's why I haven't lost weight really since my 6-week follow-up.
Right.
Now, I have other barriers than I did at that time, but it's interesting to have to try to find motivation for myself and not motivation that's based on everybody else, because as soon as that's gone, it's gone. Like as soon as
that's not even something you can control, you know?
No. As soon as I can't go to the gym anymore because I can't bring my baby and I just don't want to do anything. So I'm having to heal from that. But I think that moms, what I've observed as a mom is I think it's a little bit harder. I don't know how it is for you, but I think my kids are very attached to me. So for me to go do what I need to do requires me to have a strong sense of boundaries. It can be hard to do. And the same with my husband. But one thing that I've developed since I have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. So since the 5-year-old was probably 3, I've been developing that physical boundary at least. You know, I felt guilty. And again, I said we need to talk about guilt, but I felt guilty not letting my toddler touch my breasts when I was done nursing. Did your girls do that?
They still do. They still do sometimes.
So I didn't like that, but I felt guilty about like taking that away.
Why?
Because I feel guilty about everything. So one thing I wanted to say,
to be happy.
I'll have to think about that, what my actual answer is. But I wanted to say, people say that no is a complete sentence. You can say no, but people don't realize that to a codependent person, yes, no is a complete sentence, but the guilt that we experience after that we don't know what to do with that. Like that is why it's hard to say no, not just because you want to please everybody, but the guilt can be overwhelming for thinking that or not believing that you deserve to meet your own needs. And so the same with the perfectionism. Perfectionism, I heard a definition on a podcast, Manifestation Babe, like 4 years ago. She had this girl on, and until then, I thought my perfectionism was like a gift. So the root of perfectionism is the shame of being imperfect. That's one of the definitions. And that really spoke to me because I know that that's why that was a lot of why I was a perfectionist. The way that I coped with my not liking myself really in my 20s was to always look very nice, like always have my nails done, always dress like overly nice for whatever the event was. And it was because if I could protect myself from seeming imperfect, because that was unacceptable to me, to be imperfect. That was too vulnerable of a position. So with perfectionism, it's the shame that can be overwhelming. And as I worked through, I think was it a cake order? I did a cake order, and I had healed enough to know that I shouldn't overcommit, like over plan to do too much and stay up late every night. I knew I shouldn't do that. Like that wasn't fair to me. But then when it wasn't perfect, I couldn't handle it. I didn't know what to do with that anxiety from it not being perfect. Like, yeah, I put myself first, but now I'm suffering because I
Put yourself first.
yeah.
You didn't go and fix or whatever.
And the same with saying no, especially to my kids, my husband. I would say no and then feel guilty and then be like, well, what do I do with that feeling? Do you ever feel guilty?
Oh,
I mean,
for sure.
moms, we feel guilty.
Yeah, all the time. So actually, and I think that's something that I struggle with now too, is just figuring out, like prioritizing, like the things that I feel like I need to get done versus the things I want to get done versus like, when do you stop, checking things off your list for the day and really just focus on like your kids or, can you play with me? It's like, but I got to get this done and this done and this done. And when you look up, it's bedtime and it's like, dang it, I did it. You know what I mean? Like I struggle with that kind of a balance. But I can remember after I had my oldest, and I just like, I was with her pretty much 24/7, other than when I went back to work. But like at the end of the day, I was with her like always. And I never did anything away from home, really. Like I don't, like probably not for her first year. Yeah, like we would go to church, we would come home and that was it. Like I wasn't involved in anything. I didn't go anywhere without her, and right around the time when she was like 1.5, maybe, I remember I used to like complain to my husband and be like, I'm bored. Or, and the other thing is being a teacher, I have summers off, but he would work all day and he'd come home and I'd be ready to go do something. And he's like, no, I'm tired. I'm like, dude, I've been sitting here all day. Like I struggled because I was like, man, like there was a bit of a sense of lost identity there, I think. But the self-care component wasn't there at all. Like I would never leave because it's like, well, I can't leave because this has to be done and this has to be done. Or, she needs a bath and this. And it's like in my head, it was so dumb because it's like, why couldn't he, like, why wasn't I okay with him doing it? And that was a perfectionist side of me. Even just today making dinner, and I was sitting here thinking, like, I'm watching my husband like mix some vegetables in a frying pan and thinking like, why did he use that utensil? Because I would have used whatever. And then I started to think like, not like mad, just literally thinking like through his processing versus mine. And then I was like, but there's like 18 different ways that could have even been done in the first place. And it's like, why in my head is this the right way? Mm-hmm. Because I did it one time, it stuck, and that's how I just did it forever, but it didn't make it right. It just made it the way I did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like, why do we, like, I couldn't get away from this idea, and maybe you felt this before, like, especially when my babies were little, like I had to take care of everything, but I didn't have to take care of everything. And it's not like my husband didn't do all the things. He did all the things and always has, but in my head, it's like, I couldn't take time for self-care because I'd feel guilty. Or I hadn't even considered this idea of let me go get my nails done and like just be away for a little while so I can come back full and ready to go. You know what I mean? Like I didn't let myself have those moments. I remember one time I was like, well, I never get to get out. And he's like, then go, get out. And I was like, oh. See, and it just like blew my mind a little bit because I was just like, oh my, like, yeah, why? Why not?
I'm in the place where I'm realizing I'm the source of my own suffering.
Yeah, isn't that ridiculous?
I'm not asking for what I need.
But sometimes it's because I don't think we know what we need, or we don't know that we need it. You know what I mean? When we need it.
You get so like,
I was all worked up. Like all worked up. And I just was like, I need to get out of here. And he's like, then go. And I was like, oh.
So do you feel like, was yours coming from guilt from leaving her or guilt from leaving him?
Both, probably both. Or like this idea, like he's tired and he didn't want to go out, but I shouldn't go out without him. You know what I mean? Like, and then I remember the first time I did go, I don't know if I got my nails done or what, but I was like gone 20 minutes and I was like, this is terrible. Like, like I had a hard time just being gone and alone. And I realized that like really what it was I was having a hard time being with myself because I think, but it was because insightful. I did not know who I was anymore, apart from being so-and-so's mom and so-and-so's wife. Like this identity of who was I didn't know, you know what I mean? And I think that probably carried on through probably after I had my second kid even, you know what I mean? And a little bit into the third, because it's just like through all of those seasons I changed. So the question of who was I after I had the first one, I wasn't the same person after I had the second one and the third one. And so it's like, I had a really hard time being with myself because I didn't know who myself was.
So what did you do, or what has changed?
I think for me, like finding that my identity in Christ again and just realizing like, we all have a purpose. I believe we all have a purpose. And within that purpose, we are given assignments. So, like my assignment has been teaching for the last however many years. And it's like, my assignment can change, but it doesn't change my purpose. You know what I mean? And I think having that realization and like just understanding that I'm far more than where I'm at right now in my life. You know what I mean? If I'm where I'm at, great. If I'm not, it's not the end of the world. Like, do something about it. You know what I mean?
What do you mean by where you're at?
So like, so I don't know, like I've been married 10, almost 11 years. And, we always said before we got married, we're going to go to Texas and and like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We had all these like lofty goals. I mean, no roadmap to get to them by any means, but we had all these great ideas. And it's just like, I would have thought by now we would be here and here. And it's like, but I feel like we're exactly where we're supposed to be now. You know what I mean? But like, I think even after having that first and second baby, it was just like that where I'm at was not where I maybe thought we would be, or maybe where even I wanted to be in our life. You know what I mean? Like you said, you woke up at 35 and took yourself seriously. You know what I mean? But the night before when you went to bed and you were 34 and you didn't take yourself seriously, you know what I mean? Like you said, it was because you felt like you had earned those years. You had earned the right to do that. The day before, what was different? Nothing. Other than a perspective. And that's literally where I'm at is a matter of perspective.
Have you ever thought about how much you actually want the things that you are supposed to be doing?
I would say yes, but not until last year. Literally 2023 is what did that for me.
Do you feel like you want those things?
The things that I said I wanted?
Yeah.
Like way back when, or like now?
Way back when. The things that we're judging ourselves against.
I mean, maybe. Some of them yes, some of them no. Because I think some of them are legitimate, like, this is partially what I was created to do. And I think others, it's like, no, that's really stupid. Like, why would I judge myself because I haven't moved away to Texas when I've got family here to help me take care of these kids? You know what I'm saying? Like, stuff like that. It's like, that wasn't wisdom. But even still, like, I don't, yes and no. I never just give an answer, huh?
That's perfect. Our 10 years this year. And I had always said two things. One, I wanted to celebrate in Paris. I do not have Paris money at all. And then two, because I had to put my wedding together in like 5 seconds, which was actually 3 weeks because my husband was in the Army. And I didn't really get to do it like I wanted it and have everybody there. I said that I would do it another reception or like a vow renewal. So I started thinking about that in the summer and just feeling anxiety and pressure. And I realized I don't actually want to do that. But I was like, well, I'm going to let down 2014 me, 26-year-old me, which is so codependent. Like, I'm worried about this other version
that
of
doesn't
myself.
even exist anymore. I get it though. I get it.
Yeah.
Or do you find yourself ever like, I have to do this because I said I would do it all those years ago?
that would be really the only thing.
The only thing. I feel like I've done that in my life where it's like, you know, when I was younger, I said I was going to go out of the country and whatever. And it's like, okay, here I am all these years. And I've been out of the country now once because I went last year, but it was like, I can specifically remember telling my parents, like, I just want to travel the world. And in my head, I felt like they looked at me, not that they didn't believe in me, but they looked at me like, do you have travel the world money? Because it was just like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was not doing anything to fulfill that goal. I wasn't even pretending. And I remember for Christmas one year, or maybe it was my birthday, they gave me money to buy a passport. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then my mom asked me like a month later, she's like, did you ever get your passport? I was like, oh, I bought shoes with that. Like I wasn't even in the mindset. Like
what my therapist would say are introjected values. I think a lot of people, and you might actually want to travel the world, but a lot of people say that, I think because we sort of have this idea that that is
what we should do, life. Or yeah.
I want to be somewhere else, but I don't really want to travel. And the thing about Paris, yes, I do need to go to Paris before I die. Like I've always wanted to go to Paris, but I don't really feel like I would have fun if I went with my husband, to be honest.
We can go to Paris. Let's go.
I'm not cultured enough. I don't know how to travel and have fun. And he doesn't talk very much. And I just like, we're not ready for that. Maybe we're, 20 years or whatever. And I have a baby. I don't really like, that doesn't feel good to me to leave my young children.
Yeah.
So,
Have you ever had like conflicting goals? You know what I mean? Like, so just thinking about the way you said that, and it's like, I was like, oh, I want to travel the world and but oh, I want to have kids. And it's like, I never one time in my life thought, hey, that's not going to really, like, there's going to have to be a pause. You can't do both,
When I was a freshman in college, I remember just this time period where I realized this. I used to want to have 6 kids, but I also wanted to work full time and be this career person. And somehow I just realized you can't do that. I mean, if I had help, but I don't have help and wouldn't have in this hypothetical scenario, I envision myself hands like all in raising these kids. So yeah, that was kind of it. Right now, I want to have a 3rd kid, but those moments, like when you're talking about giving everybody, I have moments where my kids are like both asking something to me. I'm like, I can't do it. I'm gonna lose my mind if I have a 3rd one. But yeah, like right now, I want to have a career, and I've always wanted to have a career, but I also do want to be home with my kids. So I don't know how that's going to work. I'm trying to trust because things always work themselves out. And I remember when I started my career, I have a degree in health management, which really did not get me anywhere, but I started a career in St. Louis in 2011, and I started with I was doing personal training at a couple different gyms, and I worked part-time at the hospital doing this children's weight management program. And then when I went full-time, I was like, I have to be at work all day, like consistently, not just hours here and there. And I can't work out with my boyfriend at 10 a.m. And that really seemed like a loss, but that's what everybody else is doing. And it was fine. So I think that I'll be okay if I don't solely take care of my kid. Because honestly, I'm not the stay-at-home mom type.
Listen, I know for a fact God did not make me to be a stay-at-home mom. I want to talk boundaries a little bit. So boundaries, you said, was something you struggled with before because of the people-pleasing and perfectionism and stuff like that. How were you someone who would create boundaries in your head and just couldn't enforce them? Or did you just not have any sense of boundaries?
Anytime I wanted to make a boundary, I would be like, you're being unreasonable. Mm-hmm. Like, one thing I didn't like was when my friends would come to my house on the phone. And I had 2 specific friends that would do this, and I hated it. But it felt like high maintenance. Even though I genuinely hated it. I don't want you here if you're going to come in the house on the phone. So I'm just sitting here acting fake, or coming to my house and then texting or like being preoccupied with something else the whole time. I didn't like that. And I never said it because I always convinced myself that it was excessive. And I'd be like, okay, well, how do you know what is reasonable to ask somebody else for? Somebody's going to listen to this and they're going to relate to this.
Yeah.
And I feel like you probably can't relate. But
Can't relate?
I think I truly didn't know how you know what you can ask. And then I learned I was when my first was born, I felt like my husband was not doing his part, but I didn't know, like, I would ask other people, like, is it reasonable for me to have this boundary? And they're like, it's whatever you want it, like whatever feels
like what you need, or
it's acceptable for that to be a boundary. And I just didn't know that. Like, I didn't know that the way I felt about stuff mattered. So now I pay attention more to how I feel. I felt those things a lot, but I just didn't know if I could ask.
it was
for
worth
that.
saying something over.
Yeah, and part of that comes from growing up, honestly, enmeshed with my mom. And so not really having boundaries with her. And so not learning to have boundaries in my relationships. And then also that sense of, well, I need to make them happy so that I can be happy. Or my role is to meet their need, which I only like last month did I fully have a paradigm shift in realizing some people believe that other people are supposed to take care of them and then they never take care of themselves. They're just trying to get the other person to. And that's 100% what I've been doing. In my marriage, I've been putting in so much work to try to get my husband to be able to meet my needs, and never even didn't put in a quarter of the work to meet my own needs. So there's that. But as far as having boundaries, I didn't know. I didn't know what constituted a boundary. Like those feelings, I didn't know that was what I was supposed to erect. So now with my kid, where I felt guilty for not letting him touch my boobs all day. Now it's like, if he tries to get on me, I'm like, no, back up. And that took a while to get there. So the physical boundary is easier for me because it's sort of reflexive. Emotional boundaries, people often say that I'm transparent, or like, oh, you're being vulnerable, you're really sharing stuff. I never feel like I'm sharing like private stuff. Somebody commented on a YouTube video last week. She said, it's okay to keep some things for yourself. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, none of that felt uncomfortable for me. But I know that as I honor my pain and suffering more, I think then I'll start to realize some things are sensitive that I don't now realize are sensitive. Boundaries in terms of time, I still struggle to get off the phone. Do you?
I don't like talking on the phone, so it's easy to get off the phone when you're texting.
Yeah, it is. But I struggle to just like end the call because
you just feel like you got to let them get it all out.
No, I mean, I do like to talk a lot, but I just am trying to be so delicate. It's trying to be so perfect and not like.
So what does boundary setting look like for you now?
Boundary setting, you have to be in tune with your emotions to some extent, which is, again, why it's funny that you said that about me, because I guess I would be aware, but not put any weight on it because I didn't think that my experience in the world mattered that much or mattered as much as someone else's. So now I recognize that if I'm feeling uncomfortable or stretched or strained or anxious, or it's a feeling for me. Like, I know the feeling of when this needs to be a boundary. Resentment is big for me. So, well, with my husband, resentment is a feeling where I know I need to create a boundary. So one thing I noticed, I have created, this is more of a self-care thing. And I do want to talk about, I guess I'll just take a brief jag. I think when I was pregnant, I was really confronting the way codependency looks and really trying to heal from it. So I stopped all of these behaviors that were feeding into this thing. And then I had depression because I didn't know any way to take care of myself. So I was asking people what their self-care practices were. And I was like, I don't want to get my nails done. I mean, I did get my nails done. That didn't feel like self-care. I didn't want to go get a massage. But now I understand that self-care is not like frilly stuff like that necessarily. It's literally taking care of yourself in the moment. So now when I take my ADHD medication and I can work really hard all morning cleaning the house, it's knowing I physically feel exhausted. I need to sit down and watch TV. That is self-care. Or even when my son wants to interact with me after I'm off the clock, like when you go to bed, I'm off the clock.
Right.
I have clocked out. I cannot work off the clock. But saying no, I do not want you to come in my bed. That is self-care. That's like protecting my space. So yeah, that's a different way to think about it. Sometimes it feels so foreign because we're not thinking about the literal care that we take. So with my husband, I made, over the holiday break, I was like, I wanted to have more equity in terms of getting to sleep in, because again, my baby he was, until December, he was up for 1 and 2 hours in the middle of the night, just hanging out. We would go downstairs and he's tearing up the house, and then I would still not ever get to rest. But my husband also goes to work at 4:30 in the morning. So he always took priority, and I was feeling resentment about that. So I finally was like, I need this time. Even if I don't sleep, I still need to have some time on my own. And I noticed that since we've been trading off more, I don't feel resentful. I don't, like, at the end of the day, I can give him a break because I'm not building up this resentment for not getting my needs met. So with him, I know that when I feel resentful or when I feel put out, that is when a boundary needs to come up. Yeah. With relationships or friends, my cousin, and I'm gonna say this, he's probably not gonna watch this, and if he does, shame on you anyway. Shouldn't act like this. But I haven't really talked to him much since I moved back, because it's not a two-way relationship. It's like he's gonna call me and tell me by himself. He's not interested in me. And so I had called a couple times at the end of last year and didn't get to him. He gonna message me and ask me for $40. And I tend to give people whatever. Like if somebody needs $100 and I'm comfortable giving you 30 and not asking for it back, I'd be like, here's $30. Good luck getting the 70. But I felt like I will be betraying myself. Like, no part of me wants to give him the money. And I just didn't, and it was fine. So, but that feeling, I had to be familiar with that feeling, because when you betray yourself so often, that feeling is so frequent, you don't really know that it's a problem. So when I was constantly having my boundaries violated, I was constantly feeling uncomfortable, resentful, unappreciated, like constantly feeling negatively. So then it was hard to tell when the boundary needed to happen. So anyway, yes, it's the feelings for me. And then also sort of also asking, like, is this, why am I doing this? Which is good for me. Am I doing this so that they like me? Or,
like setting this boundary?
Yeah, like I often have to ask myself, do I actually enjoy doing this? So I stayed up to like 12:30 working on a PowerPoint for my husband this week. And I was like, why am I doing this? I need to rest. Am I doing this because I expect to win favor, or do I actually enjoy doing this? I think I enjoy doing it, but I have to ask myself those questions.
So I want to go back. You said you wanted to, but before I do, so I think I thought of a way to talk about how you interpret and communicate your feelings and emotions. I think you take a very like logical approach to how you're feeling. And I don't think that that's something that I certainly don't think I could sit and like process through. Like sometimes have you ever been mad about something and you're just mad and you've been mad a while, like half a day, and then you like have to remember why you're mad and you have to trace back through. I do it all the time. All the time. And it's like, I'll be mad about something and then I'll go throughout my day and I'm like, what's bothering me? Like, why? Like, and I have to think about it. And I literally have to trace back like to what happened that made me feel that way. And it's just like, why do I have to do all that? It's kind of dumb. But I think you take a very like logical approach in being able to understand how and why your feelings and emotions are impacting you the way that they are. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not something I feel like I can do, or I like have to work really hard to do it. You know, like you just said, you knew that a boundary needed to be created with your husband because you felt resentful because he was sleeping and you were not, and it wasn't equitable. Right. So there's that. Like in my head, I would have had to trace back to why am I feeling mad? And then never would have gotten to the whole, I would have just been mad, like you get to sleep and I don't, I'm mad. But I never would have stopped and said, you know what I need to do is have a conversation and then create a boundary that says this. Like it's a very logical approach to feelings, which is hard to do because usually when people have feelings involved, especially negative feelings, they get irrational. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it's just, like that's it's interesting to me, like the way your mind thinks. But I want to go back. You said you wanted to talk about guilt.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about like working through the guilt feelings, not mom guilt, because that's its own thing. Yeah. There's literally not enough of us. The kids will just take until there's nothing left. It's just the carcass. So it is what it is. But in terms of feeling guilty for saying no, it's important to realize, people are fine. You're not the only person that can save them. And I also wanted to speak to people overextending themselves at church. Because that's one place that's very easy to rationalize the work that you're doing because you're doing it for the Lord, right? So you're like, there should be no limit to what I offer. A couple summers ago, I had a friend who's just like, I'm doing all of this and no one else is capable and we have the space at our house. And so she's complaining. And I had heard on the internet that God won't have you do something that's going to hurt you. And so I said that to her and she was like, I don't believe that. But I didn't really know anything about, I didn't really know to really push it. But I was just like, this is something I heard that probably applies to the situation in some way. But now I understand it's part of that is you trying to, like, you're being the savior in a sense. Yeah,
you want to rescue.
You think that you have to be the one, because maybe you're judging others, or maybe you have ego. I mean, could be that. But also maybe because you feel like you're worthy. You're worthy when you suffer. I think that's probably, I think in terms of Christians, I think some people might feel more worthy if they are suffering. So they're not as inclined to be like, this is probably not healthy. But I think people also don't realize God can make things happen. Like it doesn't have to come, you are not Adam, right? Like it doesn't have to come from your literal body. A lot of times people are doing that because they think that they are, I'm like crossing between two things. Yes, some people feel that makes them worthy. They don't feel, and a lot of people don't feel worthy in that context. So they feel like if I do, them doing even more and feeling stretched, like literally makes them feel like enough. Like, this is as much as I can do. I'm stretching myself to here, and now I'm finally long enough to be accepted or to feel like I belong here or I'm contributing. But I just really don't think, I'm not going to say like God doesn't want you to stretch yourself, but I think that we have to be aware that when it's causing you harm, it's just probably not for you. The same as a relationship. And I know people struggle with any relationship, toxic relationships, because they want to be like a healing space, or they, in the Christian context, they might feel like, well, I can help, I can show them Christ, but that just is somebody else's job. Like, somebody else can, it just doesn't have to be you. You're not the savior. That's not your job. Like, you're
not the only option.
Person.
And if you don't do it, then I get it.
And you're even sort of like dictating. I think God gave us emotions and things so that we know where the edges are. And so you're sort of like overriding that. When I just don't think that we would have capacity only to ignore being over capacity.
Right.
So anyway, in terms of the guilt, I believe, so you have to first think, am I feeling guilty because this is my responsibility? You should feel guilty if you're not like living up to your responsibility. Right. You also need to ask, what impact does me saying no have? I am not the type to cancel. When I was pregnant, I did have times where I was like, I cannot go to dinner with you. And that was in the beginning of the healing, and realizing me suffering, it was never going to be that serious to her. Like, it was never going to be worth it to her for me to suffer like this. And I think that's like a value proposition that we don't think about. For instance, the last time I saw you, I think I dropped my AirPods at the school. Was it then? And something happened, but I dropped my AirPods at my son's school, and they were going to be off for a week. So I needed somebody, like I needed them. And his school was 30 minutes from my house, so I really didn't want to go out there. My husband's coworker volunteered to go get them. And I was like, you live by there? And then I find out she lives 30 minutes from the school. And it just wouldn't have been, so she went all out of her way to get me this thing. Honestly, it was worth it for me. But sometimes we do stuff like that, and it was like, it wasn't even that serious. So sometimes we categorically or out of principle want to show up for people, and we don't even ask, what are the implications of me not showing up? Like, is what this is going to put me through worth the benefit that they're going to get from it? Because a lot of times people are asking because they're not afraid to ask, and you just are afraid to ask. Right. So you're going to say no, and they're going to move on, they're going to figure it out. But you are thinking that you have to save the day, and you don't. Right. So what are the consequences of me not doing this? Am I saying yes because, or am I feeling pressured to say yes because I actually want to do it, or because I actually care about this person? Because, and you might not relate to this, but again, I have felt like, oh, I should do this for this person I barely know. And I've struggled with saying no to stuff like that. So when you feel guilty, you have to ask, like, why am I doing this? Is this to win approval? Because I don't need to do it to win approval.
Also, there's this idea that you don't need the approval.
You don't need the approval.
And that's really what it comes down to.
It's hard because when you don't care about you, when you don't love yourself, that's all you have is what everybody else feels about you. So at the core of all of this is you agreeing, accepting you have value because you are a person, which was news to me. And it took me time. Do you remember that, the hitchhiker, that like, the hatchet wielding hitchhiker? There was a documentary on Netflix, but somebody tries to attack a group of people or something, and he like hits him in the head with the hatchet, and the sound bite was smash, smash, smash. You remember that? He was a homeless, houseless person, like in California. And anyway, so anytime he was on camera, he would finish and say, "You are a valuable person. You are worthy of love." And he would say some other things. But I just remember hearing that and being like, I don't understand that. Or even last year, I think my therapist was saying something like, you don't have to perform to be loved. I'm like, but why would people love me if I'm not exceptional? Like, if I don't do anything. So, yeah, so you have to understand that you actually don't have to do anything to be loved. Like, you can have friends. And I think thinking about your friendships and relationships as kids is a good way to reflect on this, because if you're 8, you aren't really in the friendship for what your friend can do for you.
Right.
You just like them as a person. They make you feel good. And
That's it.
Like, that still stands. People can value you just because you are a person.
Yeah.
And you're not causing harm. So I think agreeing to that and agreeing that you have needs because you're a human person and not an AI, which I really had to come to terms with, because as the mother and the stay-at-home mother, I feel like I'm the one that can give. I'm the expendable one. So like, my life is fluid, whereas my husband's got to go to work and's got to do these things. But I had to realize I am a person. I need to be cared for. I used to feel guilty going to the doctor. So when I had a cough and I went to the urgent care, like, that was a big deal for me. And when they didn't diagnose me with anything, I actually did still feel guilty for going. But, you know, just acknowledging you're a person, you have value because you're a person without performance. You have needs and it's okay to take care of them. You require resources because, again, you're a person. If it costs money to keep a dog, it's going to cost money to keep you. And knowing that for a lot of us with this issue, a lot of the shame and inadequacy we feel is from childhood. It's not even real. Like, it's not even it's not relevant. It's not present. It's just a carryover, and we project it onto all these things. Like, let's say I wanted to start a podcast, I would look at it, and this isn't me, but if I'm this person, I look at it like, I want to start a podcast, but I just, I'm just like, my voice isn't good. I don't know how to talk, and I got to do all these things. I'm going to have to build out a studio, which you don't need to do. And I would have all of these things that make me feel inadequate. Because I already felt inadequate, I just approached this and applied it to that. So I think those are some things that are important to understand. When you have self-worth and when you love yourself, it's easier to set boundaries. It's easier to deal with people being mad at you. It's easier to ask for what you want. So while we can say, like, no is a complete sentence, I think the most effective way to change your life in terms of your relationships is first figuring out who are you, and making sure that you have yourself positioned in your life as a person of value. And then all that extra stuff just becomes easier. The only last thing I wanted to talk about was emotional boundaries. And when you get to a point where you are attuned with yourself and you care about your experience, you might have experiences, or you might come to places where you need to create a boundary that's going to really change your life. Like, let's say with a parent, where you're saying, I'm not going to see this parent anymore. And that can be hard, and that can feel really big and unfair and mean, especially in terms of your kids. And I'm saying this, I'm like, where am I going with this? Like, I'm setting this up like I truly really know, but I'm listening, I guess. But it's important to recognize that you don't need it. Like, if someone's causing you harm, you don't need to be around them, nor does your kid need to be around them. even you have to be willing to remove yourself from the situation, and just deal with that, because being too focused on the image or the idea of something is where we get caught up. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, and just realizing, like, if you're with people that constantly make you feel bad, maybe you don't need to be with them. Maybe that's going to disrupt the friend group, but that's okay, because what is the value of the group to you if you are miserable the whole time? And also, when you create boundaries, you cause other people to create boundaries, or you cause other people to change. They're either going to adapt and rise and grow, or they're going to exit your life. And that can be a hard experience, but it's just so important to remember that you're getting things more attuned to who you actually are and what you actually need.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming. If people want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Hopefully by the time this is posted, you can go to my website, briannaweldon.com. I don't know what my email should be. What do you think? It should be something at briannaweldon.com. Like, pick it right now.
Life change.
Life change. Email me at lifechange@briannaweldon.com. And I'll talk to you. I would be like, add me on Instagram, but I don't use it. I do have a YouTube channel, Brianna Entrepreneur, which is about my entrepreneurship journey, which I started in 2018. So yeah, that's a journey. I'm sharing more as I am really embarking on this life coaching situation. So I'm making more content around that, and sort of showing, I literally have gave up on my ambitions there. So that's what I'm going to be doing there. But if you don't find me on YouTube, you can email me at lifechange@briannaweldon.com.
Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope that this episode has been really useful, and something that has helped contribute and benefit your life. So again, if you want to reach out to Brianna or make contact with her, rewind back and listen. She gave you all the ways that you can do that. Let us know what you think. Like, subscribe, follow, all those things. And we hope that we'll see you next time on Mom with a Microphone.